It's story time with Sterling. How are you doing today, Sterling?
I'm good.
So we took a week off from doing podcasts, and now we're back.
Yes.
What do you got for us this week?
Well, I thought we would talk about Hendricks Quarry, since I had the piece in the paper this week. It was a small model town, which was a company town for the Union Carbide Limestone Quarry, and it was started in the early 1900s. It was on the spur of the Sioux Line Railroad. In that area, Mackinac County, there's a large deposit of limestone, and Union Carbide had established a plant in Sault Ste. Marie along the St. Mary's River, and the Union Carbide Corporation merged with National Carbon in 1917, and what they produced acetylene gas, and they needed the limestone to make calcium carbide, and when reacted with water, it produces acetylene gas, which is used in welding and torch cutting. So they had their own limestone quarry located. It was just on the county line, Luce-Mackinac County line, and it was, like I say, it was established in the early 1900s, and they built company houses. There were several there was one boarding house, and there was two barracks buildings for the single employees of the quarry. And then they had the company houses for the families that they could rent for $10 a month, which had running water and electric or gas lighting. And with the $10, they got coal for winter heating, the running water, of course, and gas for the lamps. Anyway, the crews at the quarry, they usually had about roughly 35 who were under the supervision of William Hanson. And to extract the limestone from the quarry, they would take a steam-powered drill, and it would drill large vertical holes where then they could take sticks of dynamite and place them in the holes, and then it would blow the blast would remove the limestone, which some of them were in big chunks weighing a couple 100 pounds. So they had big steam-powered shovels that took the limestone, the big chunks, and loaded them into self-unloading railroad cars. And they had a series of narrow-gauge tracks that were in the bed of the quarry, and they also had in the quarry part, they had a big steam-powered rock crusher. So they had 3 Camelback locomotives that would take the self-unloading cars over to the rock crusher, and they would go through the crusher, and then they had these 2 big storage vaults that after the stone was crushed, that would go into the vaults, and then the regular railroad cars would back under the vaults, and they would be loaded with the stone to take them to the 60-mile trip to Sault Ste. Marie to Union Carbide.
Okay, so your article is in the March 3rd edition of the Newberry News. We were talking earlier about the homes, the houses that were built out there, and how several of them made their way into Newberry.
Yes.
And the tower that's at the golf course?
Yes, the tower. Well, first, the town only lasted for about 20 years. What happened is Union Carbide found that Great Lakes freighters, could carry large amounts of limestone from lakeside quarries at a much cheaper cost. So that basically made the quarry the Hendricks Quarry, they just closed it because it was more of an expense. So instead of wasting the buildings, they moved the water tower. They had a water tank that provided the water supply for the town of Hendricks Quarry. In 1928, the Newberry Country Club was founded in 2728, and they needed a tank to store water to water the grounds. So the Luce County Road Commission took the water tower from Hendricks Quarry, moved it into Newberry, placed it where it is today at the golf course.
That's fascinating that they were able to move something, because what is the distance between here and there?
It's about like 11, 12 miles.
12 miles.
In there, yeah. And then there were 3 from photographs that I have, there were, I think, 3 identical 2-story company houses. 2 of them were moved to the 200 block of West McMillan on the south side, and they're still standing there, still private residents. They were moved here in the late 20s, early 30s. And then there was another house, which I recently discovered, that was moved to Robinson Street, but was later torn down. So there were at least the 3 houses plus the water tank that came to Newberry, and I believe the other buildings were moved to different locations. But I guess instead of just tearing them down and letting them go, they just decided, well, we could reuse them. So
how many structures were out there?
Well, I'm not exactly sure on the total. I couldn't find that, but I know there was at least the 3 company houses. There were a couple of barrack-style buildings. There was a community hall, a school, and there was a store that was just down the just a short distance from the quarry. But I'm not. And there was a boarding house. So there was a small number. It was a very small community. But from researching and looking at photographs and talking to descendants of Hendricks Quarry families, they really led a really eventful and social lifestyle. They had dances on Saturday nights, sometimes Wednesday nights, in the community hall there at Hendricks. And some of the children of the workers were actually pretty talented musicians. Some of them played the organ, the fiddle, banjo, and they provided the music. And I've even come across stories or little items in the Newberry News where Newberry families or residents of Newberry traveled to Hendricks just to attend the dances. They had Monday night church services because they relied on a local or a neighboring pastor who did rounds to all the little small areas. He came to Hendricks on Monday nights and had Monday night church services at their community hall. And they also usually had the most recent motion picture available too
Really?
at the community hall at Hendricks. So,
is there anything left out at the quarry? I'm sure there's maybe some foundations or anything, but are there any old structures that?
Probably the most notable thing that you can really see from the road is the cement walls of the loading platform where they would back the railroad cars and the crushed limestone would be loaded in the railroad cars. Those cement walls are still there, but the building, the rock crushing building, and the big metal vaults are gone. So they're really, and it's interesting because I've had several people since I published the story say that they never knew that there was a town out there. They had an official post office too. I was able to acquire a postmark on a postcard of Hendricks Quarry. So yeah, it was really interesting little community out there.
That lasted just for
about 20 years.
20 years,
yep.
And then it disappeared.
So there was also a sawmill out there. Many Newberry residents will remember the name Barrett, or recognize the name Barrett. Jesse Barrett, he was from Lower Michigan, and he was logging down in the Lower Peninsula, and he had a business partner by the name of Jay Carr, and they decided to transfer their logging operations to the Upper Peninsula. So in 1916, they decided to build a mill at Hendricks Quarry. At that time, there was no road access to Hendricks Quarry. The only way in was by railroad. So they had packed their entire operation from Lower Michigan onto one train load, which had to be brought across the Straits of Mackinac on the Chief Wawatam, and then to Hendricks Quarry, and they established the mill. They were there for 2 years, and then they came to Newberry and started a sawmill here, and eventually Jay Carr moved out west, and the operations were solely owned by Jesse Barrett. And I'm sure many of the listeners will remember the name Jesse Barrett, or his son Fern Barrett, or John Elton Barrett, who ran the gas station, the Sinclair gas station. And of course, Barrett's Logging was here in Newberry for many years. But when they first came to the UP, they started at Hendricks Quarry.
Well, again, fascinating information. A look back on history. Thanks for sharing the story. Thanks for writing the article in the paper. And
well, I enjoyed it. It's I learned a little bit more by talking to a descendant of Hendricks Quarry family, and able to acquire some really nice photographs of the operations and just the everyday lifestyle at Hendricks. It's really interesting to be able to talk to some people who can really help to tell these stories that I write. So,
because as time goes on, I mean, those stories fade away. So thanks.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for keeping them fresh in our minds and recording the history of that. Again, we want to thank you, Sterling, for sharing this fascinating story. We'll be back again next week to record another podcast. Topic yet unknown. But we'll come up with something between now and then. And for those who enjoy this, remember you can go to mynewberrynews.com and listen to all the podcasts there. So thanks for listening. Have a great week.